Hello and welcome to Conversations with Creatives. My name is Esther Stamford, and this week it's very exciting. I've got my first man on the show. I'm talking with theatre director Dewi Johnson. Now, Dewi is absolutely flying at the moment. He has just been in the West End working as the associate director on Dr. Strangelove with Steve Coogan. He's worked on The Crown Jewels with Mel Gedroych and a huge cast. He also worked on Upstart with David Mitchell in the West End as well. He also has his own theatre company. He directs Restoration Theatre, opera. He is absolutely ascending at the moment. And I really wanted to talk to him about what that looks like, how that came about, how he's doing that, how he financially makes that work, and because in those early days it can be really tricky, and what his actual process is as a director. We cover so much ground in this. It's really a really great conversation, really fascinating. He's got a lot of good points to make. He was given a piece of advice by a teacher once that is initially quite shocking. I'll be interested to see what you think about it, but completely changed the course of his life. We talk about the mentors that have been there for him. It's a really great conversation. About 3/4 of the way through, I have a massive coughing fit, so there's a weird little jumpy bit. I can feel it brewing. You might see a slight amount of panic on my face, and then I have to suck on a mint for the rest of it. We also recorded it on one of the hottest days of the year. He went to the Crescent Theatre in Birmingham, the coolest place he could think of, and I was sat in my office with the windows closed, and it's officially the hottest room in our house. So you might also just see me just melting as the conversation goes on. But it was so lovely to talk to him. Have a look and see what you think. Hope you enjoy it.
You were my first man.
I was going through and I was like, oh.
No boy, yeah. You're my first boy, which is very exciting. And you're my first director as well. So I'm really excited to talk to you because you've done some incredible stuff. And I sort of loosely knew you when you were at First Act Workshop with Ross Berkeley
Yeah.
Simpson. And I remember you doing Alice in Wonderland and just being fantastic in that and like really throwing yourself into it. Did you always want to act or be in that kind of theatre world?
No, actually, when I was growing up, I wanted to be an artist, like a painter. And I remember when I was in secondary school, I had an art class, and I remember a teacher ripping it apart, this piece of art I'd done. And I remember leaving that class being really pissed off. I was like, oh, well, I'm not going to be an artist now. And my next lesson was a drama lesson. And there was no rules. It was just, come in, we're going to create. There's no right or wrong. And I was like, oh, okay, there might be something in this. But yeah, so that was the thing that really stopped, because none of my family are theatre people at all. You know, we'd go to the theatre once a year for a panto at the Hippodrome.
I find it so interesting. It's so sort of like serendipity. I find sort of sliding doors moments like that so fascinating. You know, like you were like, I'm going to be an artist, and then you were told that you probably weren't going to be an artist, and
Yeah.
then to then end up in drama and see the freedom and the flexibility within drama that you could create something, but it didn't have to hit a certain brief. Because I think that that can happen a lot, particularly with artwork, can't it? That when you do art at school, it has to be so, I don't know. I remember doing a drawing in art class, and I just could never copy what was in front of me, but I could do something more experimental, but that's not what they wanted. And I think sometimes when you can't fit the brief, you think you can't do it. Did you paint or anything now?
Now I sew a lot. So I tend to make like big gowns and stuff like that. And again, it's because there's no rules with sewing. As long as it looks good at the end of it, like there's technique and stuff like that, but it's a lot more free than just, okay, this is the formula.
There's a woman that I follow on Instagram. Oh my God, I love her. I saw her on a YouTube interview. And she's called La Filature. I'm probably not saying it sexily enough, but La Filature. And she sews. Oh my God, the stuff she makes. And she's the most brilliant artist. She was in her 50s or 60s, I think, working as an engineer, stressed the max, burnt out, decided she was going to sew. But what she makes is she'll take a photograph of people swimming and then she sews that and she adds material. And so you look at it and you can see exactly what it is. It is the most exquisite work. And I can, and actually, if I hadn't have seen that, I don't know, you saying there's a freedom to sewing, I don't think I could have quite imagined that. What sort of things are you sewing?
Mainly, I got into sewing through like a very theatre way, was that so when I was 15, I had decided I wanted to set up my own theatre company because there was nothing in my area for people. And so I wrote to Birmingham City Council, and they had this thing at the time called Youth Opportunity Fund. And so you wrote to them pitching a project, and they gave me £3,000 to do Alice in Wonderland. And they gave me a youth worker as well. And we went around local secondary schools in Birmingham and got people who wanted to do theatre but couldn't afford to join a drama club to do this production of Alice in Wonderland. And I remember coming home and saying to my mum, "Oh, I've got £3,000 off the government," and they thought I took out a loan. So they were like,
Oh.
"What if you?" But so then the youth worker met my parents, but my mum could sew, and my dad is a builder. So my dad would build the sets, and my mum would sew all the costumes for the show. And after we did Alice in Wonderland, they gave me more funding for another 3 years. And the shows were getting bigger and bigger. And my mom said, "I'm more than happy to do your costumes, but you need to learn how to sew to help me with them." So it was by doing, like, the next one we did was Beauty and the Beast. And like, I would come home from school, she would come home from work, and she would teach me how to cut a pattern, how to sew. And it was all like, okay, if I learn this skill, then it helped the directing other side skill. And then when I went to drama school, I went to drama centre that was in Central St. Martin's, and they had like this amazing team in the wardrobe department. And when I had I didn't get a lot of time off, but when I had time away from classes, I could go to their sewing department and learn how to sew properly with like people who are training at CSM. So it was like one of them, if it wasn't again for theatre, I would never have got that hobby.
I first of all, I didn't know that about you, and I'm so staggered that at 15 you went, "We need a theatre group. I'm going to go and I mean, your parents obviously didn't know you were doing that because they thought you'd taken a loan out, or did they
Yeah.
know it, or what? How did it? I mean, what was your thought process? I mean, at 15, that's really incredible. I think to have. It's not necessarily confidence, but just to have the gumption to go, I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to ask. What was the
It was,
motivator? What was the catalyst?
it was, so I had done, when I was at secondary school, there was a project where in drama where you could write something. So I wrote this adaptation of Alice in Wonderland, and they put it on, and it was terrible. And I remember going, I'd love to do this properly. And at the time, I know, like, I had amazing teachers at secondary school, and at the time, they had 2 years earlier, they had got me an audition for the television workshop. And so I think it was Monday and a Wednesday, I would, after school, go to the television workshop. And we did this amazing play called Fuente Ovejuna. And it was the last one
I
they
came to
did.
do that.
Yeah, so that was my first ever one I'd done with workshop. And Colin directed it and Ross assisted on it. And then after that, workshop took a break for a bit before Ross revived it with first act. And it was during that break where I was like, I actually have nothing to do. my family couldn't afford to do like young rep and stuff like that. So I was like, and I'd started going to these music nights that this Youth Opportunity Fund had started doing in Tyseley. And I got chatting to the youth workers who were running these events, and I pitched them this idea to be like, I want to do this play. Do you think it's a possibility? And they were like, yeah, and the form was like, fill out a paragraph. And then they sit you down and talk about it, and then they go and fight your case for the money. So it was one of them where you didn't think at the time, like, oh, I'm going to set up this and it's going to be this. It was just very much, I want to do a play. I'm not doing a play. And the things back, we're talking about 15 years ago now. There were opportunities to do that back then. I don't think they're there now. But yeah, it was a really big, and at the time I didn't know I wanted to be a director. I just wanted to be an actor, and I just wanted to have a project to do. So that's how that whole thing came about. And then I ended up, we did Beauty and the Beast, we did The Sound of Music, we did all these like one-off concerts. And then I remember by the time I was 17 was when a lecturer had sat me down at college. I went to Stratford-upon-Avon College, and he knew I'd been directing all this stuff outside of school and college. And he sat me down and he said, you're an okay actor, but you're never going to make it. But you're a very good director. Why don't you pursue that more? And at the time, I was like, oh my God, you're so right. I hated learning lines. I hated turning up for jobs. I hated all the actor prep for it. I just wasn't good at it. But I loved the creating stuff and bringing everything together. And it was a lot of people, when I've told them that story, they're like, weren't you offended? Weren't you pissed off? And I was like, no, because it was someone sitting there being honest, going, forget that. You're better at this. Go and do that. And it was amazing. And from that point, I never looked back. I don't think I acted once more after that conversation. And then I was done. I was like, no, it's just directing.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because my instinct is, but my instinct is that seems unfair. But I saw you act, and I thought you were a very good actor. So that's why I'm shocked. Was it the Queen of Hearts you played when I saw you do it?
Yes.
Were you the Queen of Hearts? Yes,
I
yes.
was.
And you were,
Yeah.
you were bloody brilliant. You were bloody brilliant as the Queen of Hearts. I didn't see you act anything else, I don't think, but I remember thinking, oh my God, he's great. But actually, there's something that is really good in what that teacher did, isn't there? Really, like, actually it helped you focus, and it also released you of, I can just create the projects, and being an actor is not for the faint-hearted. It's and you've got creative control, and you're working with the whole team, and you're analyzing the script, and you can decide what goes where, and it's you. Whereas being an actor, quite often you're the puppet.
And I say this with the greatest respect in the world. I could not be an actor. I haven't got it. And I think it takes a very special type of person to be an actor. And I think it's a skill set that you either have or you don't have. The craft that goes into it is, and when you sit in rehearsal rooms and you watch actors and you're just like, you are amazing for what you do. You can get up, you can take direction, you can adapt, you can make this whole life, and then do 70% of the work outside of the room. It's a craft that I just wasn't cut out for.
And so the teacher sat you down, said, be a director. And it sounds like it was almost like a weight lifted, and almost like he took the blinkers off and went, yeah, actually, I don't enjoy a lot of the process of that, but I really enjoy this bit. So then did you start applying for drama schools, for unis, for that kind of thing?
Yeah. So after he had that conversation with me, I kind of went into free fall of, it's very easy, I think, to go, okay, this is the route of being an actor. I go to drama school, I go to uni. And there isn't, especially in this country, when you look at places like Germany, they've got directors' courses all over the place. This country doesn't. So again, it was kind of good that going back to drawing board, going like, oh, okay, I thought I was going to go to RADA and Lambda and all of this and be the world's next Olivier, but let's have a rethink. So the first thing I did was I joined my local Amdram to try and get experience. So I joined the Crescent Theatre in Birmingham. And while I was at the Crescent Theatre, I met a man called Ian Mole, who was directing a production of Lord of the Flies. And he asked me if I'd be his assistant. And I was like, yeah, I'm just looking for experience. And it turned out Ian was quite a big, actually, opera director. He'd worked in Cologne, he'd worked in Chicago. And because he'd gone down that rabbit hole of opera, he couldn't direct plays in this country. So he joined the Crescent so he could use one play a year. And so I assisted him on this thing. And then Ian took me under his wing for 2 years. And he had took me up and down the country to watch operas, watch plays, took me to Chichester for the first time, never asked me to pay for any of it. And because what had happened was he was in the same boat I was years earlier, because he was in his 40s, 50s by this point. He had discovered he wanted to be a director, and the doctor had paid for his education. And because Ian didn't have the money to pay for mine, he offered me a different education. So every week he would give me a play and I had to read the play, and then we'd go to his and talk about it. And it was just a
Wow.
real, you've got 2 years of, you're going to watch stuff that you hate. I remember he took me to Edinburgh for 4 days and watched some terrible stuff and some amazing stuff that I've never booked myself. And it was just quite nice to have someone to go, there's all this other stuff out there that you haven't learned about. And so while I was working under him, he said you should apply to university and read English. And that's quite a traditional route for directors. But there was at the time, it doesn't exist anymore, but there was one director's course in this country that offered a BA, and it was at Drama Centre. And I had a look at the course, and it was such a great course because they took 15 actors, 4 directors, trained you alongside each other. And then when the actors had double voice, you would have one session of voice in a directing class. And so you're learning alongside the actors. You're in the shows as slightly smaller parts. So you learn the craft. And I applied the first year, I got waiting list because I just didn't have enough experience, and spent a whole year getting experience with Ian, who'd set up his own company by then called Gritty Theatre, and was assistant on their shows, directed stuff in Birmingham Fest for them. So then when I applied the second year, I got in. And that was where I was like, oh, okay, this actually is a possibility now. It's not just me playing director. I'm actually going to go and learn how to do it properly. So yeah, that was where it kind of went to the next level.
That's one. Ian sounds incredible. Talk about paying it forward, and to give you that education and to
Yeah.
take you to shows and just show you the world of it. And my head's going in 2 different directions, but one is to say that that kind of education is invaluable, isn't it? To have that mentor that's
Yeah.
helping you. And then 2, the course sounds phenomenal, because I think quite often, I don't do so much acting anymore, but mainly because I don't like the lifestyle. So I totally understand what you're talking about. I don't like the lack of autonomy. I'd rather write my own stuff and do it that way. But the course, where you obviously had a lot of acting experience, but to actually be trained alongside the actors, to know what that feels like, to have those experiences. Again, when you do work with a director that has that understanding, it's a completely different experience to someone who's never done it. So that course sounds incredible. Sounds
It,
really
it, it
invaluable.
honestly, and I remember meeting people who trained at university rather than a drama school. And you were like, yeah, you've got there's no question that you've got the ideas and the vision, but you just don't know how to talk to actors.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's one of the big things that I look back on that training and go, oh, it was so valuable just for that.
And do you find now, because I've been to see so many plays where I'm not completely in it. I'm sort of analysing that I don't think that was quite right, or I feel like it's being too acted, and they're saying the lines too quickly. Sometimes there's a tendency in place to sort of rattle everything off really quickly, and I'm like, no, take a breath, feel. And so I've been to the theatre with my family, and if I'm really absorbed, then that means if I haven't got, it's when I think I don't believe it for a second that I go, oh, and that's true of television as well. Like if someone's smoking a fag and the smoke comes straight out, I go, they're not smoking. I don't believe this. I'm sort of slightly out now. And I don't know if you have those experiences now. Is it sort of almost less enjoyable, or you're more critical?
Yeah. And it is a shame because, you work in theatre and it's your love, but it's got to a point now where I walk away from most shows going, really? Yeah, have I just paid for that?
Yeah.
And, it's, I don't know. I've got theories on where the problems always lie. But I don't know if it's, I think it kind of does for me. And, this is just a general bold sweeping statement, but I think that training now focuses too much on content rather
Mm,
than skill set. So, for example, like if you look at some of these courses that are up and running, and they always go, "Oh, and we're going to do this show, and we're going to do showcase, we're going to do this," and you're just like, "Okay, that's great, that's the content, but where's the craft and the technique?"
mm,
So it
mm,
was, like some of the work you're doing with your uh, training courses you offer, that's, in my opinion, what it should be, because you're not there going, oh, okay, at the end, we're working towards a show. Every week it's about a session, you work on craft. And a lot
mm,
of the colleges at the moment aren't doing that. It's about going, let's get some stuff for TikTok so we can secure next year's intake. And I just think a lot of it is, okay, we're not actually teaching the technique anymore. And that's the
mm,
thing, you know, if you look now, there's so many actors classes for graduates now that are doing the heavy lifting because they're filling in the gaps from what should have been done originally. And that's
mm,
why I think, because there is a huge uptake lately. I mean, you'll know this better than me, but I remember, like, say 10 years ago, there wasn't as many acting classes and they weren't full. Whereas
mm,
now, especially in Birmingham, there are a lot more acting classes and they're a lot fuller, because I don't think traditional training is filling the gap anymore. I think
mm,
it's too much of a numbers money game to go, okay, we've got to get numbers high for next year's intake. It's not
mm.
about teaching them anymore. It's about knocking out show after show so people can see what they're paying for. Yeah, that's what I blame a lot of it on.
I think you're right. And actually, I don't actually run my weekly class anymore. I did it for 12 months, and then I stopped it at the end of last year. And it was I loved it actually, and I loved all of them. But I just it was rolling every week, and then I was
Mm.
doing the monthly class, and then I do a podcast, and then there were other things, and I wanted to restage a play that I had on, and I had ideas of things I wanted to write, and I thought there isn't quite enough
Yeah.
space in my brain to hold a class that runs every week. And and but I think you're so right. And I have noticed more and more classes popping up, and I think I was at the television workshop like you, and I didn't go to drama school because I did a showcase when I was 18 and got a really good agent and went straight out into the world. But I don't think I understood. I mean, you were obviously only there at the tail end, but I don't think I
Mm.
understood actually what good grounding that was. That yes, we did do shows, and we do something most years, but we did everything. We were doing Shakespeare, we were doing radio plays, we were doing filming, we were being called up for television programs. And then each week we were doing different things. And I'm quite surprised actually how frightened actors can be of improvisation, because at the workshop you're kind of raised on that, and
Yeah.
that's where I'm very, very happy at improvisation. But it's interesting that that's the thing that you notice. One thing that I'm big on, which whenever I run a class, is I really try to get everybody as comfortable with each other as quickly as possible. So I run a monthly class actually at the Crescent, and the actors will be different each month. There's a lot that come back every month, or some people that come a few times a year. We get a lot of new people, and the idea is it's just like a gym so that you can come and keep your hand in, but we'll do something different. So this month it's going to be script work that they'll have learnt, but we're going to film it and we're going to play around with it in different ways and stuff like that. But my aim is always, because I have been an actor and I do still act sometimes, I don't think you can do anything unless you feel really safe in a room, that you're not going to get laughed at, or that it's okay to make a prat of yourself, that it's okay to try stuff. And I don't know if that's just me, but when I go into the room, that's like the primary thing. I just want to get everybody settled really quickly because they don't all know each other. And so that they feel that need to play. I suppose you're working more with professional. I mean, a lot of these people are professional actors, but you know what I mean? You're working with a company of actors.
Mm.
Is that something, are those things that you take into consideration?
I do, and especially, I'll be honest with you, when I first started out, it wasn't, but I've been doing quite a lot of work with drama schools at the moment. And it is amazing how if you don't get that relaxed, you can fail in here vibe right on the first day, it makes the rest of that 5-week process horrible. And so I always try and I'm quite lucky in the fact that the director I always work with really sets that playing field on the first day to go, like, get it wrong in here. It's, we're here to make mistakes. And so I do completely agree with you. And I think it's that, especially younger actors, or not young as in age, as in like in their career, just starting out, no matter what age they are. I think there's always that I don't belong imposter syndrome. And it is that the way you get around that quicker is to go, everyone in here is an imposter. Just roll with it.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, I did some work at the beginning of the year with some younger actors who were sort of a year into, 6-7 months into their course. And I was quite surprised by how afraid they were to make mistakes, by and so that was my primary objective, right? And I'm going to get in the games as well, and you're going to, and it was amazing, the shift. And so it's interesting that is something that you consider as well. So anyway, going back to drama school, you did drama school, you came out, was it just like, oh shit, now I'm out in the world, or was there a showcase, or how did it work?
It was, my drama school experience was so odd because, so when I got there, and all the other directors on my course were international students. And, one was from France, one was from Canada, and one was Egyptian, but from Italy. And they were all into Ivo van Hove and Thomas Ostermeyer and all these like great directors, but really stylized stuff. And I'd grown up just watching stuff at the RSC in Birmingham Rep, and really my big thing is restoration comedy. Really wanted to learn more about that. So, and I did struggle a lot in my first year to figure out what I was actually doing there. Because, I wasn't from a theatre background. I didn't know who Thomas Ostermeyer was at the time. And so I had to work really hard.
I'm just nodding.
I had to just like read everything I could, like lived in the library. And then it was the start of at the end of my first year, I was really lucky because the other thing the Drama Centre did was they didn't run a stage manager's course. So your classes would end 2 weeks before the end of term. And all of the first year students became production crew for the third year shows. So the directors would become DSM and SM, and all the actors would take on props, costume, blah, 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 blah. And you'd have like a staff member leading the sections, but it was to give you an appreciation of working backstage and what those jobs entail. And I got on really well with the costume designer for a show. And me and her just really hit it off. And I'd mentioned to her, oh, I'm starting to get into opera. And she said, oh, there's this scheme at the Royal Opera House it's called the Stage 1 Directors Programme. And basically you apply to be an assistant on the opera, and you're an assistant there for the summer. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll apply. I'll give it. And it was my favourite opera, the Barbara of Seville. I say favourite because at that time it was probably like one of 3 operas I'd ever seen. So I got an interview, went for this interview for it, and got it. So I spent my first summer as an assistant at Royal Opera.
Wow.
So when I went back in second year, I was a bit more set, like, okay, I know what I'm doing. They taught me how to make a book, how to note as an assistant, how to follow. And the first show we did in my second year was The Rivals by Sheridan. And it was directed by Annie Tyson, who's like a god of restoration theatre. She teaches at every drama school. And it was a real turning point because I was like, this is the work I want to make. It's not this highly stylized stuff. It's just really, how do you deal with a text? How do you make people laugh, but it not being a sender, being true to the work? And then at the end of that year, we were doing a farce by Fado. We were doing Hotel Paradiso. And the lecturer who was teaching it was this Russian director called Oleg Merishnikov. And he could only do the first 2 weeks of term. And then he had to go to Russia because our students did an exchange program over there. So he had to go over and see the MA students. So I got asked if I could teach my year group, and they paid me for it. And I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, you're paying me to teach my group. And so I directed them in this big farce. And then at the end of that term, I got offered another assistant role at Dartington Opera Festival. They were doing Purcell's King Arthur. And they were like, come and be our assistant for that. So I went and did that. And then third year, you assist on the shows. And then you direct your own show at the end of the year. So I'd written an adaptation of a Mozart opera, Così fan tutti, but as a farce. Then everyone graduated, and you had the option on the director's course. Do you want to stay an extra year and get an MA? Or do you want to leave? Everyone else left, and I was the only one who stayed on for the MA. So when I went back in September, it was only me, and they kind of tailored the course around what I wanted to do.
You were the only person on the course?
Yeah. So we went from 4 directors to just the one. So because there's only one, they could do so much more. So I ended up directing the MA students in their first show. We did Love Play by Maria Buffini. Then you had to do a placement. And I went on a tour with Tara Arts for 4 months. And we were touring Freestand of the Bang Entry. It was a South Asian children's show. And went up and down the country, touring this production. And then went back, did my final show and dissertation, and graduated in 2019. And I remember making the choice that, because if a teacher had said this to me at drama school, they were like, when you're at drama school, you feel like you're being chased. And when you graduate, no one's going to chase you. But I'd never stopped running, I felt, from when I started. 2015, I went to drama school. I went a bit late. I was 21 when I went. And for 4 years, I felt like I was being chased. So I made the decision. I was like, I'm going to have a holiday. I don't want to look at jobs or anything for this 6 weeks holiday. And I'd always gone back to Stratford College to do their work experience for a week. And we did a masterclass on restoration comedy for a week. And then, students would look at key scenes from that period and perform them at the end of the week. So I said, I've got that week. That's my back to work, find a job. And So I turned up, and it's the third year I'd been going and doing these masterclasses. And on the second day, the head of the course pulled me over and he said, one of our lecturers has had to leave due to ill health. Do you want his job? And I was like, this isn't like, I was a student at Stratford. They wanted me to direct Pericles, their Shakespeare, for the second year acting students. And I was like, this is a really good way to just tread water for a bit, pay off my student overdraft, and still do something artsy. So I agreed to that. And then that finished in December, and they offered to extend my contract. So I said, yeah, go on, I'll extend the contract, whilst looking for other jobs. And I was getting to final round on so many jobs at that point. And then COVID happened. And it was, everything just shut down. Like, I remember being so thankful that I had that safety net, that, I mean, like, we were teaching all the way through COVID. Like, everyone else I knew, my fiance was furloughed, and he was sat in the garden drinking all day, and I'm there on Zoom teaching students Claire Dowie plays, and just utter madness. And I remember thinking at the time, oh crap, like, this is going to be a problem. And it really was, because then when everything finally opened up again, no one was looking for assistants, because, being a new graduate, you're not going to get to director. No one's going to give you money to direct a show. You've got to do the traditional route, assist people for a few years. And no one was taking assistance, because every show that got cancelled by COVID, the theatres agreed we will move them into our reopening seasons. So everyone who had a job 2 years ago still had those jobs. And no one was programming anything new, because they couldn't take the risk. You couldn't get a job for love nor money. But the other side of it was, a lot of people in COVID realised that they didn't want to be in the industry anymore, so they left. And it's kind of, a few people I spoke to say the same thing. It's almost like everyone went up a tier. So like,
Yeah.
you could skip kind of 2 years of your career because the industry had a hole to fill. And I was applying for, I got to final round for Welsh National Opera as an artistic fellow. I got to final round for the RSC twice to be an assistant on shows, and just could not land anything. And then I remember at one point really thinking, oh God, I had an interview for Hamlet at the Young Vic. And I remember having this interview, and it was horrific, because they interviewed something like 100 people a day for this job. And I got onto this Zoom call, and I can't remember who interviewed me. I wish I knew. But they were so rude. And they were like, I've looked at your CV. You want to do restoration comedy. Well, why are you interviewing for Hamlet? What are you going to get out of this? I know, I just don't think this is the right thing for you. And I was like, I'm earning a living being a teacher. Do I really want to keep putting myself up to the interview for people like this? And I thought then, you know what, I'm going to pursue the teaching thing more. So my boss turned around to me and said, we'd like to offer you a permanent contract. Get your teacher training qualification while you're teaching, and I was like, oh, okay, like, this could be a good thing. I'm happy, maybe do like one little show here and there outside of teaching. But I had forgotten I had applied for an assistant job on Upstart Crow. They were bringing it back to the West End, and the old assistant didn't want to do it, the revival. So they were looking for a new assistant. And at the time, Sean Foley had just been made artistic director of Birmingham Rec. So I was like, I don't have enough experience. I'm never going to get this job. What I'll do is I'll send my CV in, because he'll see it. Trying to get that point of contact. And so I applied for this job, got offered the teaching contract, and then Upstart Crow said, will you come to an interview? I was like, yeah. And I remember having to do the interview while teaching. So I set the class off with some work and then went
Oh
in a
no.
different room and did this 10-minute interview with Sean. And the first thing he said in this interview was, restoration comedy. Tell me about that. And it was the first time I'd ever done an interview where someone didn't, because restoration comedy's got such a Marmite attitude to it. It was the first time someone took me seriously for doing it and not going, oh, why do you like all that crap? And it was and I was like, I don't even care if I get this job or not. Like, it was just really nice to be reassured by that. And then 9 o'clock the next day, they offered me the job. And Sean said, I'll be back in Birmingham in a week. Let's meet up and talk about it. And I'd grown up watching Sean's stuff when he directed like A Mad World, my masters at the RSC. So I was really excited to work with him. And he gave me, so I met him, had a great chat. And then he gave me the archive recording. And he said, just study this and you'll be fine. So I was like, okay. So got home, used what I'd learned from the Royal Opera, made a markup script using the DVD, like wrote everything down. So first day, get there, there's, I think, 50% of the original cast returned and 50% of the original creatives returned. So it was half a new first day, half reliving what they'd done 2 years ago. And just as we're about to start, Sean introduced me to everyone and said, so it's exactly what it was. I haven't looked at this play in 2 years. Dewi studied the DVD, so Dewi, over to you. And it was like within the first 5 minutes, I was like, okay, can we have Gemma Whelan and David Mitchell on stage, please? And, you know, it was so surreal to be like, these are huge names. And Sean just had this great ability. I've worked with Sean nonstop now for 4 years, 5 years. And I've never once felt like the work experience boy. He always goes like, this is Dowie, this is what he does. And that's why I love working with him. But yeah, from day one, threw me in the deep end. And it was from there just working, trying to prove you know what you're doing.
What a brilliant he sounds like Ian Mole. He sounds like a brilliant mentor, and the fact that he almost just goes, off you go. I remember being a silver service waitress and at Hagley Hall. I was 14 and going in on the first day, and the guy went, here's a tray, here's a spoon and a fork, do this, right, off you go. Just pushed me out the door. And it's like that, isn't it? Because actually the more he handholds you, that is terrifying, but you haven't got time to overthink it.
Yeah.
You've done your homework, but to be in that room with those people, was it, how did you feel did you feel imposter syndrome? Were you excited? What was going on for you?
I mean, I'm still getting imposter syndrome now. Like, and I've been doing this, like, if you count all that stuff working with the council, I've been doing this 15 years. And I don't think imposter syndrome ever goes away.
No.
But yeah, it was real. I tell you what saved me on that first job. And I think it was walking in, and one of the first people I saw in the room was Helen Monks, who
Oh yeah.
me and Helen were at workshop together years before. And I think having that one person in the room who you knew as an anchor, and Helen's just amazing as a human, that kind of took the edge off it a bit.
Yeah, it's grounding.
Yeah. And it was, so yeah, that was, and it was an amazing experience, like learning, okay, how do you deal with stars? How do you deal with company managers? How do you deal with, this is someone's first job and they've never learned how to understudy before. And I've never done any of this, but I've got to make them think I have, so they're calm. And, it was all these things like, and you never once had time to go, I don't know what I'm doing. It was the ultimate fake it till you make it. And luckily, it paid off. And when we finished Upstart Crow, that was it. So just before I took Upstart Crow, they offered me that teaching contract, and I had to decide, do I take the teaching contract and have job security and get a mortgage? Or do I go and do this West End thing? And the Performing Arts Department at Stratford-upon-Avon College is, in my humble opinion, is the greatest performing arts department there is. They win awards all the time for the work they do, because they're very much like, we're not here for content, we're here to train you. And I remember sitting down, my boss going, you've offered me this contract. I've been offered this, so I think I just want you to know, but I think I'm going to do the teaching contract. And she said, absolutely not. Go and do the West End thing. You can have time off for it and then come back and teach. I was like, this is amazing. Thank you so much. And they covered my classes for the first month and all of these things. But while I was doing Upstart Crow, so I do Upstart Crow 2 days a week after we'd opened it. Then I was teaching Stratford for 2 days a week. I got a availability check from Hampstead Theatre, and I'd never applied for Hampstead, never worked for him before. And what had happened was, when I got down to final 2 at the RSC all them years earlier, the director remembered me, and he was doing a new play set in the 18th century at Hampstead, so requested I was his assistant for that. So again, the college gave me time off to go and do that. I was like, this will be it now. I've had 2 great runs, it'll be over. While I was at Hampstead, Birmingham Rep got in touch to say, can we have a production meeting? And I was like, what for? And Sean had given me my own show at Birmingham, just hadn't told me. So when I was like,
It'll be all right.
Yeah. And it was for Sky, because Sky had started this thing where they wanted to know if these comedies would work. And they realised it was cheaper, instead of making shorts and testing them, to do them as short plays and put them in front of an audience to see what would land. So, yeah, I directed that. I directed 3 shows for Sky and Birmingham Rep. And it was this amazing scheme where it was to bring, local writers, local directors, and all these things together. They don't do it anymore, which I think is a shame, but such is the biz. But while I was doing that, Sean asked me then, would I be his associate director on The Crown Jewels, which was going into the Garrick and then going on tour. And I was like, yeah. And it was a piss take of a restoration comedy. And I remember going in for the meeting with that, and they showed me the cast list. And it was just big name after big name after big name after. And I was like, okay, time to really, if I didn't know what I was doing before, now I have to know. Because also I've got to take these people on tour around the country. And while we were doing that, the news got announced that Sean would be doing Dr. Strangelove. And I remember I had to go on a few times in The Crown Jewels. And I remember being in the big wig and the footman costume. And Sean was like, oh, I'm doing Dr. Strangelove. Do you want to be associate on that? And I'm there dressed as this 18th century footman going, I'd be interested in that.
Yeah, whatever. I'm quite casual about it, not bothered.
And yet, so it was just very, I don't want to say lucky, because if I say lucky, it kind of, if I hadn't done all that stuff when I was 15, and one of the best things that ever happened to me was going back and being a teacher, because I think when you're at drama school, you live in the drama school bubble, and then going back and having to teach 16-year-olds about Shakespeare really humbles you. And I worked with incredible teachers at Stratford. There's a teacher there now who runs the acting course called Kerry Downing, and she's perfect. Any 16-year-old who's interested in theatre needs to go and learn under her. And I remember you'd just be sat in classes and she'd be like, the reason you have to learn about Stambrecht art is, if you want to break the rules, you've got to know what they are. We stand on the shoulders of giants and all this amazing stuff that's just so real. And I think if I hadn't have done those 2 years going back being a teacher, I could never have walked into those rooms in the West End and ran them.
Well, nothing is scarier than 16-year-olds, a
Oh, God,
class
no.
of 30, 16-year-olds, and trying to keep them entertained. I've done a few of those myself, and yeah, it is very grounding, isn't it? I
Mm.
mean, and also, like you say, it's not luck. You were in those places because you'd put yourself in those places. You'd applied to things. You got hamstered because you applied to the RSC. And I think sometimes when you feel like I keep getting to the last two and I'm not getting anywhere, it feels really futile. But then actually people remember, or things crop up, and the more you're putting yourself out there, the more these opportunities arise. And Sean clearly loves working with you. I mean, how was it working on Doctor Strangelove? Because that was Steve Coogan, wasn't it, in the main role?
Yeah, so it got announced while we were in tech for the Crown Jewels. And I remember everyone was like, have you seen what's just been announced? And I was like, no, what? And they're like, Sean's doing the Stanley Kubrick film Doctor Strangelove on stage with Steve Coogan, co-written with Armando Iannucci. And I was like, oh, okay, that, I'm not shocked. Like, it's very
Mm.
Sean kind of show. And then when someone said, oh, you'll be working on that with him, and I was like, I doubt it. I was like, that's a big show. And then when he asked me, I was like, oh, okay, because I mean, you know how it is. You work with people in this industry, and you never know if you'll ever cross paths again. It's very much like you enjoy the moment, don't expect the next job.
Mm.
And I've always been like, I think you should never go, oh, this is it. This is this working relationship now. Everyone needs to work with new people at some point. So when he asked me to do it, I was like, oh yeah, I'd, really love to do it. Um, and that show, more than any show I've ever done, taught me more than I think anything ever could have, because at the time, it was so early when I got brought on board with that show that kind of things were sorted, but nothing was in stone. So I remember going to the really early model sharings to go like, okay, does this work for the set? And the designer for it, Hildegard, who's like one of the top theatre designers in this country. She does all of Robert Icke stuff. So working with someone of that caliber, and it was such a different process to anyone else I'd ever worked with. Then learning how to do, so as an associate and an assistant, the amount of people really don't understand the amount of planning and paperwork you have to do. And it's going like, okay, for example, one of the jobs I had quite early on was the insurance for the show. So your insurance to, let's say, for example, we got quoted, it's 80 grand to insure your show. If you can get the understudies in a certain method, you can reduce it by 40 grand. So I had to make 10 different breakdowns of, well, if you had this person understudying this role and this one doing this, but in 10 different variations where you can prove to insurers the show will always happen, it will never get cancelled. And I'd never done stuff like that before, and that was really interesting to learn. And then it was one of them as well, where as we were getting closer and closer, certain names were coming up, and it was really interesting to know, the back and forth of that, of, well, this person wants to do it, but they're committed to this. We're going to see if we can move this to blah, blah, blah. And then what was really nice was Sean was doing with Nail and I at the time in Birmingham. It was getting ready to open. So I ended up doing all the first round auditions for Strangelove, and we were seeing something like 40 people a day to shortlist into a list of 15, and 13 of them would be cast. So that was quite nice to go like, okay, I'll spend 2 weeks meeting all these actors. I've shortlisted them, put the final 15 in front of Sean, 13 of them got cast. So that was really great to go like, okay, from day one, the cast have seen me as part of the creatives, not just.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
that show was, and then when you go into day one of rehearsals and the room's like got the Kubricks in the room with you, you've got all these like huge names from the world of showbiz. I mean, that was just, as a show as well, I'd never worked on something that big. You know,
Yeah.
we had projection, we had a B-52 bomber, we had magic. It was like everything you could put in a show. The only thing it didn't have was a dog. But apart from that, everything else, it was massive.
And how brilliant that you were, like you say, seen from the very beginning. So you were involved in the whole process. How did you find it being on the casting side? Or had you done a lot of that already for
No, I've
production?
done a little bit, but never to that extent where, you know, you're interviewing these people going, number one, are they right for the role? Number two, will they fit in with the company you're trying to create? Are you willing to take a chance on some people? You know, are we going to cast someone who, for example, there was one actor who hadn't done swing experience before. We needed a swing who could do 4 tracks, maybe 5. And there was an actor who was so charismatic, so lovely, and he'd never done that before. He'd only ever understudied one role at a time. And it was one of them where you sit there and you go like, do we have time to train him? And then you realise, oh, actually, I'm asking that question to myself. Do I want to?
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
was sat there and I was like, well, actually, yeah, I do. So that was really nice to go, you know, I know the people I'm going to be training. I know the people I'm going to be working with. And it's
And I think
interesting,
that's,
like, sorry. Mm.
I was just going to say, I think that's something that people don't, particularly actors, they don't always take that into consideration. They just go, "Oh, I obviously wasn't good enough," and well, often, no, it's nothing. It'll be, you've got to all fit together, and like you say, you're
Yeah.
building a company, you're building a team of people, so you have to know that can work, and you can train him and things like that. It's far more involved than just you were crap or not. You wouldn't
Oh,
usually be in the
yeah.
room if you were crap.
I mean, that's what you try. I always, whenever I do auditions with people, because I think you can, in the nicest way possible, you can get some real arseholes at auditions, and you don't know where that person coming into that room to audition for you is terrified. You don't know where they've come from. You don't know if they've had to travel overnight and sleep on a bus to get to that audition on time. And I think the one thing you can do is actually just be a decent human when they walk in. So I always try and, you know, have that conversation with them, be polite. And it is that, like, you've made it into the room. That in itself is more than 50% of the population ever get to do. And, you know, sometimes it comes down to, for example, there were 2 actors we had to pick between for a certain role in Strangelove. Both of them could have played the role amazingly. The only reason one got it over the other is because one had just been in a musical, and the Strangelove, we sang in it. So that was the deciding factor. There was nothing wrong with this other actor. They would have been great at the part. But when we tallied up the marks, that was what sung it.
Yeah, yeah, and it is little things like that, and like, well, you had the earlier experience, didn't you? You got down to the last 2,
Yeah.
not quite got this, but then got hamstered. Um, what so what do you want to do? Do you have a play that you'd like to do? Do you have a vision of where you'd like to go?
I would love to, uh, and probably because I've worked with him so much, but I love the fact that, so Sean Foley is the #1 director in the country. If you're doing a comedy, he's first on the list. And I would love if within the next 15 to 20 years, I became that person. Because I have no interest in directing real life boring crap. Like, for me, theatre is escapism. And there's nothing
Um,
better than a load of people sitting in a room laughing together. So that's what I really love doing. I love restoration comedy, but I love comedies in general. And I think I really like doing these weird forgotten plays. And I blame Colin Edwards and Television Workshop for that, because where else would you get a load of secondary school children doing a Spanish Golden Age play? And you know, you look back now on it and you go like, that was the weirdest choice they could have picked, but the most amazing choice at the same time. Because, you know, it's so easy with these youth groups to do, let's do bouncers and shakers, let's do a John Godber. But to go, no, we're going to do a Spanish Golden Age play that deals with rape and the Me Too movement before the Me Too movement. And we're going to do it with a bunch of 15-year-olds. Like, that's why I'm saying, like, when it comes to training and stuff now, Ross and Colin had the right idea back then. And I think,
Totally.
you know, I would never have come across it. And when I talk to people about that play when I was coming up, people are like, how do you know that? And I'm like, oh, well, I did it when I was 14. um, yeah, I love finding these weird plays that no one does anymore and kind of reinventing them. Like, I love Marivaux plays. I'm desperate. It's a really well-known one, but I'm desperate to direct The Rivals. I've always said if I direct The Rivals, I'll retire because I think it's a perfect play. But no, at the moment, I'm trying to, you know, I love being an associate. I love assisting, but I am trying now to get to that point where I'm making my own work. So I'm trying to get 2 projects off the ground at the moment. One of them is my Così fan tutte adaptation as a 6-handed farce, trying to get that up and running. And then I've been talking with Simon Nye, who wrote The Crown
Oh, yeah.
Jewels. He's got another play that I love, and we're trying to get that off the ground.
Didn't
So,
he write Men Behaving Badly as well, Simon Nye?
yes.
Yeah.
So, and he's just the most gorgeous human, so lovely, so like really, there's no ego there. So he sent me the play originally because he said, "Oh, you might be interested in this," and it's great. It's just an absolute piss take of restoration comedies, and so I'm in love with this play. I'm trying to get it on at the moment, but we'll see. But no, until then, I'm really enjoying it at the moment. I'm doing loads of R&Ds, and it's, you know, I've got, because of the work I've done quite a lot in education, a lot of ex-students have asked me, can I come in for 2 days and do an R&D on their plays with them? And I'm really enjoying that because it's that you just get to go in and play and there's no pressure because you're not putting it on at the end of it. And it's just, you know, discovering. And it's also my way of doing what Ian did for me, passing down that
Yeah.
ladder to the next lot. And I think,
Yeah.
you know, that's why I always, if someone says to me, do you want to come and work on this? I'll always be like, yes, great.
And there's something just about, like we were saying earlier, just the freedom to be in a room and play and see what works and what doesn't work and go from there. It's funny, you know, you're talking, going back to the television workshop, you know, that is invaluable, doing those obscure plays that no one's ever heard of, because there is a tendency to do the same things. I remember they did a writer called Michael Bordage came in and wrote a Commedia dell'arte play for us. So I was 17 at the RSC, being Isabella, and you know, and like, no, I didn't know what Commedia dell'arte was, and it's so fantastic to do that kind of work. I mean, I probably should have asked you this earlier. Can you explain to anyone who's listening what restoration is?
So, restoration comedy is a really unique time in English fit. We're the only ones who have it. And it's any play written from 1660 to 1700. And it's when theatre came back after the Puritans shut it and burnt it all. And it's only theatre that exists during the reign of Charles II. And they're these outrageous plays that really looked at society. They're plays where it was the first time women played female roles. So they're all about sex, money, and power. And all of them are written by politicians. So the language in them is like fencing. It's so clever. And they've got a bad name now. It's always, people think of them as just camp with big wigs and frilly fans and all this stuff. But they're so sharp. They're so funny. And then they eventually morph into 18th century comedy of manners. And, you know, they're big reflections of society at the time. But they're just gorgeous. They're bawdy. You know, there are so many plays of that era that have inspired things now. and you're just like, oh well, that's what that play was, 400 years ago. And I just and I people say, oh, why do you love them so much? And I think it's that, I grew up in Tyseley, which is like the factory district of Birmingham, and I don't want to pay £30 to go and watch a show at the theatre about depressed people in tracksuits. I can walk down the street and get that free. Whereas,
Yeah.
yeah, whereas I love going to watch these shows, and they're so a world that's not my world. That's what I love about them. So, and I recommend, if you've never seen one, go watch one.
Mm. And when you're working with a company, do you find when you're working on a show, do you find that you're just completely absorbed in it, locked in, and the outside world slips away? And if that's the case, how does that affect your personal life?
I'm a big believer. Whenever I do a play, I always believe it's the three worlds of the play. So, world of the playwright, the world we live in today, and the world of the play, and where do those three meet? So, you're always constantly never quite locked away. You've always got, oh well, I've got this in the real world, and that reminds me I've got to do this later. But my fiance does say to me, it's like, I can tell when you're on a play because you're so hard to get hold of, and you're just so invested in it. And I have got better as I've got older of going, okay, that's work. Now I'm at home and I can put something on Netflix and just be a human again for a little bit. But I think, yeah, because a lot of people I find get so invested in their work that they do forget there is a world elsewhere. And I'm trying more and more now to not do that. Like, I've
I
just
think
had a
it's re
holiday for the first time in
oh, yes, I saw on your Instagram. Where did you go? It was
I
somewhere
I went on a
fabulous.
cruise of the Med.
Oh, lovely. Yes, that was it. I saw
Yeah.
I saw your photographs, and
But
it looked lovely.
I haven't been able to book a holiday since I started on Upstart Chrome in 2021 because I was
Wow.
so obsessed that if I book a holiday, I'm not gonna get a job. Whereas it
And
was the first time where
yeah.
I was like, "Actually, I kinda need to start putting my life first."
And I think it's really hard, isn't it, when you are a creative who is freelance, you're waiting for those opportunities, you don't want to say no to stuff. But then also, like you say, you do have to remember you have a life outside. And I personally find it really hard to do when I've got a project on. I'm just in it, and it's great that you're managing to find that balance. If you'd have told you at 15 that this would be where you would be today, what do you think he would have thought?
I think he would have not believed it. I think he definitely would have gone, "So you're not an actor then?" Yeah, I think there was never any doubt that I would go into theatre. Don't think I honestly think at 15, if I was never sat down and had with that conversation, I wouldn't be working in theatre now. I don't think I would have gone to drama school at all. Because I think I would have been so miserable not preparing for auditions and then wondering why I didn't get the job. It would have really made me turn against it.
Mm. It
So
saved
I
you a lot
think,
of time, didn't it, really? It saved you that
yeah,
is a
and I
path
think
you
it's
could have
going to be
gone.
heartbreak in the long run
Mhm.
because I think it's so easy to lie to people and feed their delusion.
Mm.
Whereas actually, it would, you know, I wouldn't say it was cruel to be kind. I think he was literally being really kind and honest and being
Mm.
like, go and do this. You will be better at it.
You're really good at this. Go, yeah,
Yeah.
don't waste your time doing the two things. Last question. If somebody wanted to get into directing at any age, actually, not just young people, what would you advise?
I, as as cliche as it sounds, just do it. Fine. And I did for masterclass, I gave a seminar and this question came up. And I always say, I'm like, there, the only difference between you and your friends rehearsing in your front room and putting on a show, whether it's a, the back room of a pub or you hire a small studio space, the only difference between that and a show on the West End is money.
Mm.
There is no difference in it. Like, if you want to do this stuff, find like-minded people who are like, yeah, let's just do this for the love of doing it. And you'll be so much fulfilled by it. Like, when I left drama school, I set up my own theatre. No, while I was at drama school, I set up Foppish Theatre, where because we were all students, we had a free rehearsal space. We never made any money. We made losses on all of our shows, and it came out of my student finance. But they were the best things I've ever done in terms of like just loved being in a room with those people, learn how a play operates, learn how to run a room, got in debt for it, but loved it. And that's what I always say. If you want to start directing, find a play that you want to do. And don't sit there going, oh, I'm worried about the cast size. I'm worried about the set. Forget all that. Our sets are our original shows. We borrowed all the costumes from my drama school. My mom got back on the sewing machine and made some of the bits that I needed. And I got a load of dust sheets that we painted. And that was the set.
Yeah.
And it's, honestly, my big advice, anyone who wants to direct, find the play you love and you'll figure it out in the room. You can buy all these books on directing, but, nothing will teach you more than being in a room with actors.
Yeah, yeah, totally. You just remind, when I was a little girl, I used to write plays, and then in the summer holidays, I would get my grandma's next door neighbours, which were a brother and a sister, involved, and then I would direct it, and I would draw programs, and I would charge the neighbours 50p, and we would stage it in my grandmother's garage, and I would be in. I mean, I'd literally sing the theme tune, everything, but I would find a way to make it work and do everything. And we'd stage this play, and I think actually sometimes you just have to think outside the box, don't you? And you can make anything work. Just it's a bit like you did when you were 15. You applied for. You took take one step, and then you'll work out the next step afterwards. You don't have to have it all figured out at the top. You'll work it out as you go.
Exactly. And I think I forget that now. And I think it's really worth, I remember being 15 and I remember getting the money and not even knowing where we were going to perform it. And like the first 3 weeks we were rehearsing with no performance date in mind. And I think just back then there was a lot more, just do the next step instead of thinking about the end. And I think that's what I, in my own practice, want to start getting back to. Just going, okay, just do the next one, the next one, the next one. It doesn't have to be the whole road in one go.
And it also echoes back for me for what you were saying about a lot of courses now. They are so bothered about the content that they put out so they can recruit the next group that you almost you can be thinking about the end point before you even start so much because it has to look shiny and exciting, but actually you could stage a play in your garage or, like you say, the local pub, and then that play might do something else, and so, or you'll learn from it or whatever. And it doesn't always have to be this overnight internet sensation or whatever. Not every. In fact, a lot of things the majority of things aren't that. So just take the steps and don't be too afraid. The path you'll work it out. You do. If you really want to do it, you work it out.
And I think what you said earlier about you run these actors' gyms, and I think that's such a great phrase for it, because it isn't about turning up once a month to put on a play. It's to make the craft good, and if the craft's good, the play, whatever you do, will be good. And
no, go on, carry on.
I just don't think there's enough actors' gyms anymore, and like people willing to put in the graft. Like, not everything has to be Instagrammable.
Yes, exactly. And I think also every time you go into a room, I mean, Bella Ramsey was in Television Workshop like us, and although she's a little bit younger than me, but she said if she's in Nottingham, she goes to class because you will always learn something from the people you're in the room with. Somebody will do a scene in one way, somebody will you know, say something in a certain way, or you'll access something you hadn't accessed before. And I think it's a good way to keep learning and growing. And
Yeah.
or even, oh God, I was awful today, or I felt awful. Why? And it's just strengthening those muscles, isn't it?
That's it. And I still do them now. Like a lot of theatres offer open rehearsals where you can just sit and watch the rehearsal take place. And you sit there and, you know, maybe you did know it, but you'd forgotten that little thing. Or you've done it for so long that you see someone else do it and you're like, oh, actually, you're always better. Like, I think that's the beauty with working in theatre. You never know it all.
Yes, yes,
It
yes.
is the one industry where you're always learning.
And I think, like you say, the number of times I will hear something and I'll go, oh, I knew that, but I had forgotten it. Oh,
Yeah.
yes, I'm glad that's come to the top of my mind. Thank you so much for talking to me. It's been so fascinating to hear about your career, and the fact that you were 15 when you started doing that work is amazing. It's wonderful to see you soar. I can't wait for you to knock your mentor off top spot and be the best director in the country. Mate, I'm done. I'm here now. Whatever happened to Baby Jane? But yeah, totally. And yeah, and I'm excited to see what you do next. Yeah, I'm really grateful for you for giving me your time.
It's been a joy.
Oh, thank you.
So lovely to talk with Dewi. Such a nice guy, and I'd love to know what you think about the advice his teacher gave him. There's sort of and maybe it's just me, but there's a sort of a thought in society that we must encourage and just keep going for your dreams. And actually, it was so beneficial to him to be told, actually, don't do this. You're bloody good at this and sort of okay at that. Go down this path. And I think there's such an interesting conversation to have around that, because as I said in the conversation, saw him act. He's bloody good. But his teacher obviously saw something in him as a director, and he's clearly a bloody good director as well. I'm also fascinated about the brilliant mentors that have taken him under their wing, and what a real difference that makes, and how important it is to pay that back. Yeah, just a lovely, lovely guy. I really hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you did, please feel free to comment below, like, subscribe, share, all that jazz, and I will be back next week with another guest. Have a lovely, lovely week. This is a March House production. That's why it's under March House. I feel like I should say that. And oh God, I'm suddenly struck by the urge to say keep creating again, but I also feel a bit gross about that, but still it popped into my head. It's not strictly, Esther. It's not strictly. Stop talking. Okay, goodbye. I will see you next week. Have a lovely week. Take care.